Hello and welcome to Gwent. This guide is aimed toward those who want to expand their collection and the decks and the archetypes available to them as fast as possible on a budget. So when you begin the game, you're gonna have 5 starter decks. You can check out one of them, and we can see that you have 6 silvers and 4 golds, and 3 of the golds are neutrals. That means they can be reused in every single deck. And the 1 gold we have is actually like discard synergy, and the 1 silver we have here is like 2 damage plus resurrect synergy. So the problem with these faction specific golds, that they are not only faction specific, they are also usually deck archetype specific as well. And they cannot be reused in other decks. And that is a big deal early on, because if you only have 1 card that cannot be used in other decks, then you're pretty limited. And you might just say like, hey, I like this deck archetype, I'm just gonna invest in it further and further. And to an extent, you will probably have to. But I believe it's best and it's most fun to leave it a little bit open-ended, so you can hop into other deck archetype as well. You don't wanna be just limited into 1 deck archetype that you just have to play for like 2 weeks just to even have a shot at something else. And having neutral cards is actually a really good way to start out, because they can be reused in every single deck. Also, the keg choices need to be talked about a little bit as well. If you want to go for a big collection and you don't mind being a little patient, you never want to craft bronzes, because you're gonna get them in time. Especially you don't want to craft for example, like trio rares that have cosmetic versions, because because you actually get 3 times as many from the kegs, because these cosmetic versions function identically, but they look differently, and because they look differently, you're gonna find 3 times as many of them. You might want to craft like some specific rares if you're just starting out, but if you find them later, you can see that it costs you 80 scraps to craft one, but you only get 10 if you mill it. So that's really not good. Ideally, you wanna focus on epics and legendaries if you're a little bit patient. And let's just limit it to standard only, just to go through it a little faster. And I'm not gonna analyze every single one of them, because that would take up hours. I'm gonna go through all the golds and the silver options you should consider in the neutrals, especially if you're a beginner and just want to acquire cards that are gonna be fairly useful in many of your decks. And you might ask, what is wrong with Triss Merigold, Geralt, and Royal Decree? And well, they are not really the best in slot. Triss is okay, she's like 12 strength, and if she hits something and kills something that could get more value, then she's actually pretty strong. But you can't really guarantee it. Geralt is a 10 that can get up to 30. I would say Triss is just better, unless you really don't have a target. That almost never happens. And Royal Decree, Taints the Bronze, it could be an okay choice if you're looking for a specific gold in your deck and you want it always. Like, for example, like Triss Butterfly, or maybe Yennefer the Conjurer in specific decks. But for the most part, or maybe even CIRI Dash, but this is really not a card that you would want generally, especially if this is a last card, like last gold card, like at the bottom of your deck. You just like, you draw into it and you don't have any other golds to draw into. This card sucks. Anyway, so what are the top golds you should consider? And I believe the first that you need to consider, and the one I would go for, is CIRI. In the closed beta, she was actually 6 strength, and she was still one of the most popular legendaries, and she was played in many decks. Almost all the high rank decks had her, for a good reason, because she's actually card advantage. You can just play her, and your opponent, if your opponent overcomes her, then your opponent pays 2 cards. Or if you win the first round, you play her second round, and if your opponent can't overcome her, then again he pays 2 cards. Extremely powerful, especially combined with Roach or some other tempo option you might have. Extremely powerful card. And don't be afraid to use her to win the round either, because if, for example, you only need to do like 5 points and you play a CIRI, and you might seem like, oh yeah, I'm not really using her ability, but you are, because if your opponent overcomes your strength, then he's making a decision to lose 2 cards, and that's exactly what you want. So either you win by losing CIRI, or you just your opponent. It's a lose-lose situation for your opponent. That's what I'm saying. CIRI is extremely good. Only problem with her is that, only problem with her is that if you already lost once, then she's just 7 strength and not really good. But because you have mulligans at the second and the third round, that's actually not a huge deal, because you can just get rid of her. And also, if you already got value from her, for example, first round, then you can just mulligan her 7 strength body away, and you just get another card, potentially a gold one. Extremely powerful, so you just straight up got a card advantage. And if you just draw into her later, she's not a dead card, because 7 is not terrible. Anyhow, she is definitely my number 1 choice to include, and my number 2 choice, well, I'm not too happy to say it, but it's gotta be said. Ragnarok. Apply Ragnarok to all rows on your opponent's side. Ragnarok turns start damage, the highest unit on the row by 3. So it hits all the rows, it lights up your opponent's entire board, and every single row takes 3 damage. Assuming an ideal scenario, your opponent's gotta take 9 damage right away, and even if your opponent has a first light to get rid of it, you already got 9 value, and he's also spending a bronze on top, so I would say that's already worth it. And if your opponent doesn't have a way to get rid of Ragnarok, then oh boy, he just lost that game. And that's why it's a bit cheap, and it's probably gonna get nerfed, because it is just dumb, in my opinion, but it's undoubtedly extremely strong. There are some plays around it, and your opponent might have a clear sky. If your opponent is only playing on 2 rows and has a lot of access to clear sky, then you're only gonna do 6, plus he's gonna clear sky right away. It's like, okay, like whatever, like you did your opponent lost a bronze, plus you did a 6, that's about like break even. But that's usually basically always gonna happen at very least. And they need to have the best case scenario. Like they need to have first light right away, and if they don't have it, they lose the game. So, what should be the third one you should consider? And this is a very interesting one. These are not like this is not really a strong top 5. I actually prepared the top 5, but you actually can only put in 4 cards. So like CIRI and Ragnarok basically can fit in any deck. Ragnarok is not really like, if you're like a very heavy deck, then you might not want the Ragnarok. For example, you're playing Wild Hunt and you're just spamming Frost, you might not want Ragnarok. But in most decks, Ragnarok is like, hell yeah, no brainer, this card is amazing. And I believe the third card you should consider should be Igni. Still a very powerful card, And because it's actually got a little weaker because many units are not agile, and it's less likely that you're gonna hit 2 huge ones with it. But many factions can move around the units, so that could even like make it better. So who knows? And also you can just set up. I feel like many factions have a better ways to set up the row, because if it hits like 2 units, if they have the same strength, then they both die. And it doesn't matter if they have shield or armor, doesn't matter, they die. So Chaotic is extremely powerful. Maybe sometimes it's not gonna find its mark, but if that is the case, then your opponent is usually just not packing enough power. And most of the decks, I believe, are packing a lot of power these days. You just gotta see, it's not gonna be like, hey, I can add it to every single deck in every single meta, but that's basically how it feels usually. Unless the meta is just like all about just playing nothing, then probably Geralt doesn't really find its mark. But if your opponent's playing something, then you're probably gonna get some value out of him. Worst case scenario, you gotta mulligan him away. But usually he's just like, hey, I'm gonna win you the game. So extremely good card, would fully recommend that. And the fourth one is Resurrect. It used to be a card that only resurrected your units, but it also resurrects now any unit, any gold unit. It's important that it's your unit, so you can't resurrect Ragnarok. So any unit from either graveyard, so either any gold unit, and that makes it a lot more versatile. You can also screw over Ceres if that's what you want to do, and it's just. But it's very versatile. You can also replay your ridiculous gold card, and it's not really gonna be a dead card like sometimes it was in the past, and it's extremely versatile. Especially if your opponent has good gold cards, you can just replay their amazing gold cards. You can replay your own gold card. You only have to watch out that like any gold cards get played in the first 2 rounds. Like, come on, that's probably gonna happen. Like, this card is amazing. I would even like to put it over Igni, but it's definitely close between these 2. Renew is just extremely versatile, and you can just like put it in every single deck, and it's definitely why it's in the top 4. And the only one I would possibly could justify putting in the top that could be run in every single deck is unfortunately Drought. It's the weaker version of the Ragnarok because it hits the weakest units instead of the highest ones, but it still does 3 damage and it's still crazy. Some players out there, I know, that's what they're doing. CIRI, Ragnarok, Drought. It's incredibly stupid. And it works, because it's very, very powerful. And that's their deck, in many of the deck archetypes. Of course, if you're just like running a neutral card that you might not... Yeah, you're not exactly like using all the faction-specific golds, but you can't really afford them anyway. And so... And we need to check out the silvers as well, because the silvers shape your deck as well. And the first one on my list, and actually, before we get started, I need to mention that the silvers you're starting out with here are not trash. Decoy is very useful generally, and Commander's Horn is more like a you can, if you have a lot of dudes in the same row, you can buff it up. Scorch, pretty useful generally, not in all the decks, but you can like put it in like half the decks and it's gonna be good. Dudu, it's a good way to catch up to a strong enemy, but I wouldn't really recommend that. You can probably just play some strong guys yourself. It's also King of Beggars is also a good catch-up card, because strengthens self enough to tie the round, or to maximum 15 base power. Extremely strong. And it actually strengthens itself. It becomes as strong. So for example, if you're running it in SKELLIGE, you can actually resurrect this guy as a 15 strength if you played it on, well, you've played it really behind and it became a 15 strength, it's gonna die as a 15 strength. So that's actually pretty important. And that makes it pretty powerful. I'm saying these neutrals you're getting are actually not half bad by any means. Cleaver also, it's not a great locker, but it's pretty good. And if you want an extra locker, he's definitely your guy. But let's just get to the top list here as well. This is not by what I consider the best power, best bang for your buck, but what can you reuse in the most decks and also pretty good to include. Because of course you can put any kind of crap in all the decks, but it needs to be powerful. And the first is definitely ROACH. Because you can get just like 5 power anytime you play a gold card. That's extremely powerful. You can just tempo out. ROACH actually has some synergies in some factions. You can just put her back in the deck, making her even better. But even if you're just like getting like 5 power out of her anytime you play a gold card, like the first time you play a gold card actually, she's very strong. Not much to talk about there. Operator is my second choice. It's odd because he was a very niche card before, but with the changes, it became extremely powerful. He can only copy bronze units, and he's a 9 power. But the thing is, everyone can mulligan away cards, and all factions have units that benefit only their faction, or like at least a very specific deck archetype. And if you give that unit to your opponent, it's gonna be complete garbage for them. So, and if you actually do it in the last round where they can mulligan that unit away, they're gonna hate you for that. Because, for example, if you're doing it with a Wild Hunt Navigator, you have a unit that gets out a Wild Hunt unit for you, a bronze unit, and getting out a bronze unit is like 10 strength. But that Wild Hunt Navigator is not gonna navigate anything for your opponent, so that's just a free strength unit, and you get like 10 strength on top of it. Like, let's just say like a Wild Hunt unit is worth like 10 strength. So the operator becomes like 19. And it's just so reusable in many factions that I would like put him at the second spot. And also if you play him, of course, the last round, their opponent can't even mulligan it away. And even if you play it early and your opponent mulligans away the card that you gave them, like for example a Queen's Guard or a Wild Hunt Navigator, they might just run the risk of drawing it to them again. So that's just very scary. And the first spot is actually a shared one. And in a way, we can call it the third and fourth, but it doesn't really matter. These cards, also double cross, strengthen the highest unit in your deck by 2, then play it. And marching orders, strengthen the lowest unit in your deck by 2, then play it. Especially powerful if you're like pulling other silvers out with it. You can guarantee that you're pulling out specific cards that are very impactful in your deck. For example, Aldous Double Cross can also synergize well with Ogier, that I wouldn't really recommend to run in every single deck. But with a proper setup, he's actually like 7 power first turn, 5 power second turn, and 3 power last turn. So he's actually providing 15 power. If he gets buffed up, then he gets even stronger. And if you play him with an Aldous Double Cross, then he becomes like 21 strength, more like it, across 3 rounds. Extremely powerful. But Ogier is like not really something that you would want to play like second round or third round. Just straight, just really on the board. If you can play him early, And that's what Altus Double Cross can do. It can get out those crucial units. Like for example, you can also use it with Operator. You can guarantee that you can pull an Operator with it. If Operator is your strongest card. So either you draw into Operator or you draw into the Altus Double Cross. You're most likely gonna play Operator that game. And it just makes your deck more consistent. And also it's strengthened. So if you have ways to resurrect units, it's even better. Same thing with marching orders. But you gotta watch out, like what is the low card that you would wanna get out. And it's kind of the same way. Same thing. Again, you're fishing for key cards. Usually silver ones. So you're actually like playing 2 silver at the same time. And it could be a really good tempo as well. Anyway, the fourth one is, I would have to give it to SKELLIGE. Because it can be countered by one specific rule clearer bronze card. And that could shut it down. But most of the time, players are not running that. This could be like not a good card, if that is the case. But those cards are not really a thing. Those are not really common. Either, the meta is either like weak weathers that also get some power already. And come with like some units, like Wild Hound plays a Biting Frost and they might just play a one-row weather clearer guy, but you already got some value. And SKELLIGE just really punishes stacking on one row. There's another card like that that does that, and it's not a weather card. It's Marigold HAILSTORM, and it's the next one for me that I would nominate as the really good card. If your opponent are running, so this is a good way to punish row stacking if they are not prepared to clear weather, and this is a good way to punish row stacking if they are prepared to clear weather, because this is a special card, this is not weather. And if you're up against like 50 points of Imperial Brigades, you can just play this and round them down half their power. It's extremely strong, but it's not really something that I would put in every single deck. Obviously, you can't really put in like all of these cards. We are like checking it out. Like we have like ROACH, but these are the cards you could most likely put in a deck. You wanna like put in like free, like at least 3 like faction specific silvers. Like those are like most factions actually have like at least 1 or 2 and like 3 or so like strong faction specific silvers that really boost the archetype that you might not have early on, but you can do a whole lot with neutral silvers. Anyway, and last but not least, that is definitely can't find its place in every single deck out there, and it's gotta be Alquist, especially with the change in the open beta that every faction can mulligan away a card at 2nd and 3rd round. If Alquist triggers, and that's a big if, because he's 6 strength, he can get killed by Alzur's Thunder, they have 4 turns to kill him, so they don't even have to kill him in 1 turn, and oh boy, even a Fog can kill him. And even if your opponent passes early, then his timer is never gonna trigger. Some things could go wrong, that's what I'm saying. But if he triggers, he not only damages the enemies, but also gives you a card advantage, and that's extremely strong. And some factions actually synergize better with him. Like you can buff Alquist up in hand, or just give him some armor, whatnot. Alquist can get a lot stronger. And the fact is, if the meta is just too passive, all about just doing your own thing, and sometimes that's the case, Alquist is always an excellent choice, because you can play it, your opponent is not gonna shut it down, you're gonna get a card advantage, and gonna hit them hard, and your opponent is probably gonna lose that game. So it always like forces some kind of answers. And if your opponent is not running answers, is all about like, oh my god, I'm just gonna buff up my dudes, then Alquist is really gonna punish it. It doesn't fit every single meta and every single deck, but it's really an amazing card that I think it needs to be on the radar of everybody. At least in the future. And like these cards should like give you a good start. Like for example, like Manticore Venom, like it could work out, but like 5 adjacent units by 4, like, you know, that's just very situational. That's really not gonna happen all the bloody time. But I'm not gonna go over all the situational cards here because there's not much point. Also, like Olgir can be an excellent card if set up correctly, like with the Altus double cross that was talked about. So some cards, if like the weakness of this card that, you know, you can't guarantee to have him early, but if you can guarantee to have him early, then this card goes from like not even on the top list to like, hey, this card is awesome. But of course, in order to guarantee that you get him early, you would need to run a deck where he is the highest card. He's the 7 is the highest card you got. To like, it's not even a guarantee, but it's fairly likely. Anyway, I believe that's it, guys. Tell me what you think. Hope you enjoyed it, and happy crafting. And of course, you wanna get some faction-specific cards. Eventually, usually like least few silvers can really help you out. That can just like really boost the specific strategy you're going for. But you might not need the specific golds for that strategy, and actually just really cost a lot. So, and the best way you can do it is just like, just go on the ladder, just do your best, and that's what I would recommend. Just go to 10 guys and try to climb the ladder, even if you're like, it doesn't really matter. You can just get some free kegs from that and learn a little bit, and maybe it will allow you to make an amazing deck, at least one amazing deck that can climb the ladder and allows you to expand your collection to where you want it. Anyway, that's it, guys. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Have a good one.